We'll work on that opening. Welcome, everybody, to the book club, our first one for January as we start a book club for this year. Some of you already know, some of you supporters may already have a list in advance, but we have the book club on the website. So if you're wondering what books are coming up, the website's the best place to go. We have the next 3 months in advance ready for you guys so you guys can prepare yourselves for that properly. So today's book, this month's book really, is Restoration by D. Thomas Lancaster. And feel free, by the way, this is an interactive, very chill sort of experience. I'm going to do a review of the book, things I like, things I don't like, my recommendations, and I'm going to give the book a score at the end. We're going to go over some key points in the book, things that I think you should know that are in the book. And because this is going to just be sort of a relaxed conversation, if you have questions or whatever, drop them in the chat and we will talk together. And so I will be monitoring the chat the entire time. As you can see, actually, so I have a relic here. This is an ancient piece of archaeological evidence. Okay, so this is the old first edition of the Restoration book. The new one looks like this. And so this is the 10th anniversary edition. This is the one that you can buy now, brand new. But 10 years ago, that was the one that you bought. And so I have this one from years ago when I first bought it and read it and was absolutely floored by the book. And this one is an updated version, and we're going to talk about some of these updates too. Interestingly enough, there are 3 additional chapters in this one, and we're going to talk about whether or not I like or dislike the additional chapters, or if I like or dislike the direction that those chapters change the book in overall, because they do. And he talks about it a little bit in the 10th anniversary opening edition. He sort of talks about why he added these chapters and whatever. So I guess let me go ahead and pull up the book title here at the bottom so you guys have it for reference. This is a book written by a man named Daniel Thomas Lancaster, but he doesn't usually go by Daniel, just D. Thomas Lancaster. Excuse me. Restoration. And the subtitle sort of says it all. Returning the Torah of Moses to the Disciples of Jesus. Wonderful synopsis on the back too that you can kind of read from, and you already know where this is going just from the subtitles as it is anyway. I'm going to be drinking coffee tonight, by the way, and so if you're joining me in a cup of coffee, this is pumpkin spice by Starbucks. At me. See if I care. So anyway, first and foremost, brief overview of the book. In fact, I'm going to actually have the book out in front of me, and I'm going to kind of go over some bits and pieces of the book. So if we open up to the beginning, what we'll have here is your table of contents. I'm actually going to spend some time in the table of contents for a little bit. Yes, Bobby, blue, fancy. I like the white one better, to be honest. It was easier to get dirty when carrying it around in a backpack at college. In fact, you can kind of see, I'm not sure if you can kind of see some of the blemishes on it. Yeah, you can, just a little bit. But this is the original cover, and this is, like I said, a relic. So I keep that one on hand, and this is the one that I use for notes now. I bought an updated, I actually had to buy an updated version for the book club because I had not read the 3 additional chapters. And I knew that there was an edition. I had seen it when it came out, but I had not read it for myself, so I needed to actually get it. But all right, so first and foremost, we open it up in the introduction. The introduction is just literally that. It's an introduction into Thomas's life, Mr. Lancaster. And actually, he even explains why he goes by Thomas instead of Daniel. About him being more of a doubting Thomas. That's how he identifies with his personality, versus being a Daniel, like a strong spiritual leader who just has nothing but trust. He sort of identified it with himself as being a doubting Thomas. And so this is very good communications 101, by the way. Anytime you're going to tell a lesson or give a story, and you're talking to an audience that doesn't know you, you should first and foremost introduce yourself to that audience, so that the audience sort of knows the voice of the person that they're dealing with. And Thomas does an amazing job at this. He gives you a little bit of his backstories, and like why he reveals a little bit about himself, why he chooses the name, and a little bit of how, the circumstances that led up to him starting to look into Torah. So, in fact, let me go ahead and open up a couple of notable lines here, actually. All right. So in page 10, halfway down, he has things like, as a young teen, I decided to read through the Bible for the first time. When I did, I noticed several glaring inconsistencies between the biblical text and what I thought I knew about the Bible. The words of Jesus were particularly unsettling. He seemed legalistic. He almost never talked about going to heaven when you die. I began to have a sick feeling in my stomach. And he goes on. There's other inconsistencies that he seems to notice, like the Sabbath, which he knows occurs on a Saturday, but it switches to Sunday, and there's no biblical evidence for that. And so these are like just some things that he took away that sparked his interest. But the most notable, and I by the way, relate very personally with Thomas here. That was actually I had the same experience, but I didn't really grow up in a church. That's where we differ. I decided to read the Bible because I wanted to know it so that I could give an answer when Christians open their mouths. So I actually had a malicious intent on reading the Bible at first. And eventually that backfired. Now here I am, a strong believer. Funny how that works. But I did begin reading the Bible, and I did notice a lot of these inconsistencies, and they did bother me because it did feel like Christianity just had there has to be more to the history is essentially what I thought. That you can't just read this book and think and come away with Catholicism all by your onesies. And so that's what got me started in studying church history. So anyway, this line though really resonated with me. I remember thinking this exact line years and years ago, and then I read it in his book, and so I have it highlighted here. And it's at the top of page 11. No people on earth have been persecuted like the Jewish people. I quickly corrected him. He's in a museum, Yad Vashem, for the Holocaust. And the history student giving the tour said this, that no people on earth have been persecuted like the Jewish people. So Thomas quickly corrected him, saying, except for the Christians. And the historian laughed, a sound you don't often hear in Yad Vashem. And so he says, I suddenly realized that I stood on the wrong side of the fence. If we Christians were the real people of God, why did the world still target and hate Jews? Shouldn't we be the ones on whom the forces of evil bend their energy? Instead, we are all too often the ones dispensing the evil. Now, that's not the takeaway, right, from the introduction of the book. That is just something that I also happened to think to myself at a young age when I began entering into my studies. I had a similar thought. I was like, well, it's supposed to be difficult to be a Christian because we would be the enemy of the Satan. So why does it seem like it's easier to be a Christian than a Jew? And that was what got a start for me as well. So there's a lot about this book that I really resonated with personally. So I guess I have a bias to that. I began reading the book thinking, wow, this guy is like really speaking to me. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's kind of how it was for me. Coffee time. So, moving on past the introduction, he discovers Messianic Judaism. He's under the tutelage of a teacher, and things that I really love about this book. So, actually, I'm not really done with the overview, but I'm going to kind of go back and forth between things I love and the overview. He does give the definition of a Judaizer in this book. Right in the introduction, he talks about the conventional idea, the sort of Christian mainstream idea of a Judaizer, and the actual biblical definition of a Judaizer. And I love that he does that because this is a massive common misconception that is rampant in modern day Christianity, and even with atheism, because they really they get most of their information from Christians anyway. But so that is a really important point that he immediately hammers in the beginning here. And what I love about it too is he's sort of tongue-in-cheek about the whole thing. He does say, if you accept the conventional definition, then absolutely, I'm a Judaizer. And then of course he goes, but if we're going by the biblical definition, then I'm not a Judaizer. And I like that tongue-in-cheek where at the end he's like, yeah, I guess I'm a Judaizer then. And then same with legalists. So he goes over the conventional definition of legalism and the theological biblical definition of legalism. And again, tongue-in-cheek, he says, then I guess I'm a legalist according to mainstream Christianity. Love some of that. Very, very friendly. I would personally love to meet D. Thomas Lancaster in real life. He seems like a nice dude. And he's one of my favorite authors. He's written many of the books that I really enjoy him as a writer. His writing style is very friendly. He doesn't feel like you're being attacked when you're reading from Daniel Lancaster. And he could write a book about things that you absolutely disagree with, attacking your very theology, but he writes in such a way that is so friendly and warm that you don't feel like you're being attacked. You feel like you're just having a conversation with a close friend, and you sort of like just have this eye-opening moment with him, but you don't feel like you're being attacked, which I really like about his writing style. I admire that a lot about him. So chapter 2 is easily my favorite chapter, The Journey Away from Torah. So this is, if you read nothing else in this book, this is the part of the book that you should definitely read. This is easily the best chapter in the whole book. Over and over again, we get the same sort of question here at Alternate Media. You know, we've been around not too long, but every time we get some new followers that kind of jump on board and they begin to discover Torah for themselves, they have the same question. How did we get so far away from this? What happened? Explain to me how Christianity evolved into what it is, which looks nothing like it originally started as. If what you're saying is true, that Christianity started as a sect of Judaism, as a Torah observant sect of Judaism, how in the world did we get to where we are now? Chapter 2 is one of the best synopsis of that entire process. It's not overly scholastic. It is well sourced, but it's written in a way that's easy to read. It doesn't require your mind to hold on to the subject of a sentence while it long-windedly explains itself, asking you to depend on words like the former and the latter, and so making it difficult to read. It's very, very easy to read, and it's very concise. It answers those questions. It shows you the things through history and even kind of puts you in the shoes of the person. The book asks you, Thomas Lancaster asks you to imagine yourself as though you were in this particular situation. And he describes the situation. It resonates really well. And he backs it up with all these historical facts about early church history. This is the single most important chapter of the entire book. This is the chapter I probably read over and over and over again regularly, because not only is it very well done, but it is very well sourced. As I said, all the sources are there, but they're not in your face. The sources are sort of hidden away. He uses the footnotes. And so if you want all the sources, you have to go to the back of the book. But instead of throwing all these things at you, he just puts a footnote. And if you want to go look further, you go to the back of the book in the bibliography, and then you can go from there. But yeah, there's a lot of things. Basically, long story short, Christianity was originally a Sabbath-keeping, Torah-observant sect of Judaism. Even the Gentile believers were doing these things. But over time, as political discourse grows between Rome and Israel, eventually a revolt breaks out. And now if you so much as look like you're a Jew, and if you associate with Jews in the diaspora under Roman control, you are now an enemy of the state. Thus begins the parting of ways. There's also rampant anti-Semitism in the Roman and Greek mind, whether or not you're a Torah-observing Gentile. There's just this natural sort of inclination in the ancient Roman world to kind of be anti-Semitic. And so as we go into the 2nd century, Justin the Martyr, Ignatius, and all of these guys have to keep reminding Christians to stop doing Sabbath and keeping kosher and doing all these things. Because once again, the Jews are not only basically subhuman in the eyes of most Romans, but the enemy of the state because of the revolts. And then the second Jewish revolt just makes things worse. And there's a rift between Judaism and Christianity that grows even further as that revolt goes on. Many Jews don't want you and because you're not Jewish, and Romans don't want you because you look and associate and you're basically Jewish. And so you're sort of stuck in this middle ground where you're on both sides, but neither side wants you. And it's a very interesting. The chapter is really well written, easily the best chapter in this entire book, and it even goes into the Reformation. Chapter 2 will touch on Martin Luther and how he was essentially. They were hoping that he would be the one to bring the gospel out of its exile state of exile. But rather, he sort of overcorrected, and instead, the gospel remains in exile as he would radically begin to shoot down Sabbath keepers and Torah-keeping Christians. There's this last line when talking about the Reformation. He talks about how now that many common people have a Bible to read for themselves, he says this here, it's on page 33. Whenever the Bible was read without theological manipulation, believers were returning to Torah. Nevertheless, anti-Jewish faction prevailed. The anti-Jewish faction prevailed. So the return to Torah stalled, and the gospel would remain in exile. The time was not yet ripe. Several more centuries would pass before the momentum returned. And yeah, that's one of my favorite lines. Whenever the Bible is read without theological manipulation, believers return to Torah. And again, that's just one of those things that's true for me as well. Whenever I began to study the Bible for myself at an early age, I began to see that even in the New Testament, the idea was to eventually be more practiced in Torah. That was the only religion at the time. It was basically your only option. So then we move on to the Dead Sea Scrolls and modern Israel, and that's kind of it for how we got here. Those two chapters are incredibly important. The first one is a great introduction. It kind of helps resonate with the reader. Many other readers can personally relate to some of the feelings and issues that he had. Chapter 2, we get into the dirty history of church history. Now, chapter 3, from this point onwards, this book is primarily geared towards beginners, people who are not familiar with the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, Genesis through Deuteronomy. They're not really familiar with Judaism at all as a whole. This book is very much geared for a Christian, and you could be a very experienced Christian. It's not about whether or not you've been a believer for a short amount of time or a long amount of time. This is geared for beginners in Torah. And you can be a very experienced Christian. This book is still one of the best books to read if you're not very familiar with Judaism as a whole, or even just the concept of Torah observance within a Christian mindset or context. If that's not something you're familiar with, this is the book for you. Now, it's an even better book for those of you who are still beginner Christians, because it will go over some of these Christian misconceptions. Now, if you are, if you're not a long time, let's say a 20, 30 year Christian, the points will not feel as attacking to you. Again, this book does not make you feel attacked at all. But he's going to talk about common Christian misconceptions. And so if you're a little bit newer to the Christian faith, you're going to see these misconceptions and go, oh yeah, I'm aware of some of these. I've heard this before. But you're not going to hold on super tightly as he goes through and sort of dismantles some of these. Whereas other more seasoned Christians might have an issue with it. So far, I've recommended this book to tons of people. I have yet to hear, even from some of the most seasoned Christians, anything negative about this book. I've had very, very close family members who are Christian, and I've had them read this book, and they absolutely loved it. They adored it, and they're still not Torah observant. Totally fine. But now they're much more familiar with where I'm coming from, and this book is incredibly unifying in that regard alone. Because again, that one of the things I really like about this book is it's not attacking. It doesn't make you feel attacked at all. And so you can very much read this as a Christian and not feel like, even though it's sort of dismantling Christianity on a historical standpoint and a theological standpoint, it doesn't feel that way when you're reading it. You just sort of see that there's a logical progression, and it's very friendly. It's not overly scholastic, so it doesn't read hard. It's very nice. Chapter 3, what is the Torah? Again, this is a very basic overview of what is considered Torah. There's some good points in here about legalism versus obedience. Chapter 4, summing up the Torah. This is actually where you get introduced to Hillel versus Shammai. Now, this is good because I know people who have a master's degree in theology who are just learning about Hillel and Shammai. And in Judaism, this is basic stuff. And so there are some parts of this book where it's introducing you to fairly basic Jewish concepts that even some of the most seasoned Christians have never heard of. And so chapter 4 is going to be really good at introducing you into the Jewish world, the mindset. You're going to start to see how the Jewish world operates. This is a very introductory sort of chapter. I can't think of the word right now. It's very introductory to the concepts. There it is, of that you're going to find in modern rabbinic Judaism and in ancient first century Pharisaic Judaism as well. Some good points that he makes in this book, in this chapter particularly, is he talks about how love is the fulfillment of the commandments, and there's a very common Christian misconception that means you only need love, you don't need the commandments. And one of the lines, so he addresses that topic here, and one of the lines that I've highlighted: we must protect the biblical concept of love from being so generalized that it loses all meaning. The idea that the Christian heart defines its own standards based on the vague ethos of love is a delusion. He kind of goes on to this, love is more than this 60s hippie, love is a law unto its own idea that does not scripturally or theologically sound. Chapter 5, Torah in the New Testament. This is a very, very good read. This is where we start to see for the first time a non-vilification of Pharisees, and the priority of Scripture. We're going to start to see how the Torah is the foundation for the New Testament as a whole. In fact, the last line of this chapter, the bedrock on which the Bible stands, is the revelation at Mount Sinai. Chapter 6 is the revelation at Mount Sinai. It's the giving of Torah. We go over the revelation written on our hearts. So that's another part that he talks about here, the idea of the Torah being written on our hearts. Little Mount Sinai, how everyone has their own miniature Mount Sinai in and of themselves. Again, everybody, if you have any questions so far, put them in the chat. Now, here's where we start to diverge. So chapter 7 is the inner Torah, which is, again, new creation theology. It's a lot of Romans. You're going to see some history here about how Paul basically talks about this concept of an inner Torah, and that's not nothing new in Judaism. But chapter 8, this is where things diverge. So there are 3 new chapters in this version from the old one. In the old restoration, these 3 chapters here did not exist. The chapters are labeled the Torah for the sons of Noah, an argument about the Torah, and Torah lost and found. These are chapters 8, 9, and 10. These are the new chapters. These are the ones that I sort of had to go over and see for the first time. Basically, chapter Chapter 8 is basically what we went over last night. It's sort of just an overview of the 7 Noahide laws. To pill someone. Oh, okay. I was reading to red pill someone or blue pill them. Funny. So this goes over the 7 Noahide laws. It was just we actually had an episode about that last night on New to Torah, our Killing the Church series, and it's a very basic overview of the 7 Noahide laws. Chapter 9 is more now about putting into context Acts chapter 15. It goes over what is being discussed, what is the origin of the discussion, what are the actual arguments being set forth, what are the contexts of certain words being used, such as circumcision. So he's going to go over how circumcision is essentially another idiomatic term for legal conversion to Judaism, a position that I agree with. We're going to talk about, in fact, here he explains the concept of a ger toshav. And if you're on Discord, you know that I have labeled myself as ger toshav. And so you will be introduced to the concept of a ger toshav and what that means from the Jewish perspective, and these 4 prohibitions that are found in Acts chapter 15 and what really this is talking about here. And then chapter 10, the Torah lost and found. So he's got some letters written in here from Rabbi Isaac Lichtenstein. He is a Orthodox Jewish man who lived in the 18th century. I think late 18th, early 19th century. And he remained a strictly Orthodox Talmudic Jew, but he did believe pretty late in his life, I think the last 30 years of his life, he did believe that Yeshua was the Messiah. And so he wrote some letters. I actually have a book of a compilation of Rabbi Isaac Lichtenstein's works. You can find that also on First Fruits of Zion. They have that book. I think the book's titled The Everlasting Jew. Very good book. It's just a compendium of his writings. And how he argues that there's no contradiction with the New Testament and the Talmud, that it makes perfect sense to continue living a Jewish Orthodox lifestyle and still be a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah. He saw no problems with that. He's done a lot for the Messianic movement. And again, don't let anyone ever tell you, I've seen this going around on TikTok before, don't let anyone tell you that Messianic Judaism was invented in 1970. That's incredibly false. Nothing could be more false. This movement has existed since time immemorial, since the beginning of Christianity, quote unquote. It wasn't yet called Christianity for another couple hundred years, but since its founding, after the ascension of Yeshua, the Messianic Jews have always been around. And so, he's one. We also have a letter in here by Rabbi Jacob Emden. He did a lot. He also lived in the 18th century, mid 18th century. He was not a believer in Yeshua, but he saw Christianity as a positive thing, and he did see. So he's got some letters in here showing that. Basically that even non-Messianic rabbis can read the New Testament and see the obvious implications of the Acts chapter 15 ruling. Now, in here, he begins to make the distinguishment between Jew and Gentile, and I'm gonna get into my thoughts about that later on. There's a sort of small disagreement here. But that's fine. These 3 chapters did not originally exist in the first book that I read, but now he's gone back and he's made that correction. All right. And then from this point on, the Sabbath of the Torah, it talks about the Sabbath, and some things about that you're going to find in the New Testament. Same with the festivals in the next chapter, in chapter 12. And he's going to go over the holidays very, very briefly. Again, this is very introductory book. The life of the Torah, this is sort of like a daily, monthly, yearly sort of cycle, some stuff. to know in a Torah lifestyle, such as mezuzah, food rules. And again, he's added some things in here too about the differentiations between Jewish and Gentile practices, some things that we'll get into a little bit later. Jots and Tittles is chapter 14. This is a good midrash that Yeshua incorporated himself. So here's where in this last half of the book, we actually get to some of the things that are most asked about, some of those sort of bigger topics that are some objections. So we've been able to address some Christian objections so far. And from this point forward, we're now going to see some objections that we find from Christianity that is based on misunderstandings on difficult laws and renderings of things that you're going to find in the Torah that are just difficult laws. Let me see here. We're going to go over in here the oral Torah, right? Versus the written Torah, sacrifices, priesthood, purity laws, some of the more like capital punishment, unclean animals, difficult laws, things that from a Christian not knowing anything about Judaism, when you read the Torah for the first time, you're going to find some things in there that you initially recoil at, right? That you read it and you kind of wince and you go, really glad that doesn't apply to us anymore. And that's the thought. And so the terrifying notion then becomes, if the Torah is still valid, well, then those terrifying things that I'm really glad we don't do anymore, that's even more terrifying now, because the implication is that still applies. What do we do with that? And so there's like a sort of internal panic, and that's going to be addressed here. This is a good section. It's not exhaustive, but it's a great introduction to where to get started. And these are some of the bigger points that are the most common he's going to address here. There are many books can be written about all of the objections, but we're talking about some of the bigger ones here. Chapter 16, the oral Torah. What I like about this book is it presents the oral Torah in a very neutral light, not a negative, not overly positive. There are things in here that seems to be very pro oral Torah in certain aspects. And I like the way that they treat the oral Torah. A big mistake we see in Messianic Judaism as a whole, primarily in the Hebrew roots movement, is a disgust for the oral Torah, for the agadic materials. It's a sort of blind hatred, to be frank. But he goes over why it's important to know about some of these things, how they can positively contribute to a Torah lifestyle, especially for Christians, how they enrich our understanding of the New Testament and some of the arguments that Jesus gets into with the Pharisees. It's a very good, it's a very neutral approach, and I like it because it allows the individual to not be immediately, made to lean towards hatred of the traditions, which we see that a lot in newly Torah observing Christians. They just have a sort of immediate hatred for all things oral Torah, mostly because of people like Michael Rood, Nehemiah Gordon. They have done so much damage to the Messianic movement by introducing their Karaite style ideas to a large audience of those who do not know better. And it's very unfortunate. And so this book is a nice breath of fresh air where we actually see a much more neutral stance on the oral Torah. Chapter 17, Paul in the Torah, about how Paul loved the Torah. It was his very, he absolutely adored the Torah. And then chapter 18, restoration, the confessions of a Judaizer. This is sort of a concluding chapter, just going over some of the stuff that we have already talked about, how some may disagree. These ideas of being a false prophet. If Jesus is a false prophet, he actually talks about that a little bit here, because of the ideas that we've introduced at the beginning of the book. And then, of course, we return to the idea of Judaizing, and before we get to the restoration at the end of the book. He does have an appendices here. The Apostolic Decree, excerpts from Torah Club, Chronicles of the Apostles. Behind me, you will see Chronicles of the Apostles right over my right shoulder. It's easily one of my favorite commentaries on the book of Acts. And this is, again, a commentary. He pulled it right out of the chapter 15 of Acts commentary for that appendices. Very, very good. It goes into much greater detail about the Acts 15 thing. So that's the general overview. It seems like a lot, I know, but that's just some things. So now we're going to move into the section, things I like about the book. This book is a beautiful starting point for anybody interested in Torah at all, even just looking into Messianic Judaism. Maybe they've never heard of it before, or maybe they have heard of it before and they 100% oppose it. Even if you hate the Messianic Jewish Torah observant Christian movement as a whole, this is still a beautiful book to give you an introductory idea to what it even is, so that you can sort of formulate for yourself or have a better knowledge and understanding of the type of person you're dealing with. And then for the Christian, or even for the new Torah observant Christian, Messianic, whatever you prefer, this is a wonderful place to gather for yourself the necessary terms that you're going to be using. And by terms, I mean you're gonna learn words in here like Gemara, Mishnah, Midrash. You're gonna learn some of these words that you've never heard before, and this book is going to introduce you to these concepts. Ger Toshav, for instance. Even the word Torah, it's gonna introduce you to the word Torah. It's gonna give you a background to the etymology of the word Torah, how Torah means hitting the mark. It's an archery term. It comes from yareh. It means to hit the mark, and that chatat is the Hebrew word for sin, and it means to miss the mark. So there's this obvious connection that Torah and sin is essentially, he brings up the point that not doing Torah is the definition of sin, and sin is the definition of missing the mark, and Torah is the word for the mark. So very, very good introduction to some of these concepts, that I feel like, having done this now for more than 13 years, I kind of take them for granted, actually. I often forget, I guess not where I came from, but that not everyone's aware of some of these terms. I tend to use them and then realize later on, that's a concept that needs to be better explained. So it's an amazing starting point. I try to read this book once a year, just to remind myself how to interact and have a conversation with Christians who have never heard of us before, which happens a lot in our line of work. And the book is written in such a friendly manner that you could basically just read the book to them from memory while having this conversation, and you will never come off as a snob, right? You'll never sort of approach the conversation as I know better than you, and you should be doing what I'm doing, and you're just a dumb Christian. I love that about this book. This book does not attack you. It's very, very comfortable. It's very friendly. And if you read it enough, you will begin to adopt the way that he speaks, so that when you go to speak with other Christians, you can use that same method of communication, which is very, very effective. You don't want to alienate anybody. And that's never, you're just going to push people further away from Torah observance if you approach with this, I'm better than you, I'm right, you're wrong, you're part of a flawed history, I'm not. This sort of, I know more, so I'm better. Even if that's not your mentality, you could be saying things that project that sort of mentality. And this book does a really, really good job at not making the receiver feel to be attacked, that it is more of a, oh wow, that's very interesting, I did not know that, very, very cool. Oh, if I could add an alternate media bonus chapter, what would it say? That is a fantastic question. Wow, we're gonna come back. I'm gonna put a star on that one. We're gonna come back to that. I need time to think about that one. Other things I like. The first few chapters are phenomenal. The first I would say 4 chapters are absolutely pivotal to anybody in this walk of life. Jew, Gentile, Christian, Torah observant or not, if you don't read the rest of that book ever at all, at the very least, the first few chapters are a must. If you read the whole book and you don't remember any of it, if you take one thing away from this book, it's chapter 2. Chapter 2, hands down, easily some of the most important material. That's going to give you the starting point for understanding how church history plays a big deal into the development of church theology as time goes on, which eventually becomes the Catholic Church. And then we see this massive departure from Judaism. And it just seems like one of those things where every Christian does seem to be aware that Christianity started out as a Jewish sect. And then there's just what is it? Dark Ages? There's like just a period of time where we don't know anything, it seems. And then suddenly we pick up history at 150 AD, and that's where we start church history. And so everyone just kind of, a lot of, I remember not questioning it myself at first. And then I kind of remember thinking, oh yeah, hold on. What happened between 30 and 150? Hold on. Like there's a massive gap in our history here. And that's a little bit more than 100 years. I feel like that's important. But many Christians are not familiar with that gap in history. And that is an amazing, overview of the church history. It gives you the materials that you're going to need if you want to learn more. You're going to have plenty of the footnotes in the back. You can go and find Eusebius for yourself, Josephus for yourself. You can see what he's using, Ignatius, Polycarp, all of the source material that he's pulling from. It's going to be there, but it doesn't talk to you like you're a scholar. It talks to you very friendly. And if you are a scholar, you can go to the back of the book, look through the source notes, and do the research for yourself. Absolutely the most important chapter of this book, in my opinion. So another thing I really like about it is it's not overly scholastic. It does talk to you like, you're a normal person. This book is very user-friendly for anybody. At any reading level, really. I think as long as you have at least a 6th grade reading level, this book is for you. It's very easy, very friendly, and I love that about this book. I have no problem with recommending this book to anybody because it does read very, very friendly. There are some books that I absolutely would love to recommend, but it's just so far above their reading level that I'm very hesitant to do such a thing. Like with the Tanya is a great example. The Tanya is a wonderful compendium of books and teachings, but it's really, really above a lot of people's reading levels. So I'm usually very hesitant about offering that as a reading suggestion. And so what I love about this book is it's very informative and it's super easy to read. Absolutely love it. And I see you in the church split. I see you. Restoration is a fantastic book. And that's actually the same for me too. The first book I'd ever read that made me seriously consider being Torah observant. That is also true for me as well. This book was very, I would say, pivotal in getting my journey started. When I first read the book, I would still say it took me about 3 years before I began to even adopt some practices, but the book just ate at my soul for those 3 years. and it forced me to do a lot of research. And I adore the book for that. I had a very positive interaction with this book. It challenged me very greatly. And I love a good challenge. Another thing I like, this book hits all the big objections first. This book, go to any Christian, tell them you're a Torah observant Christian. They're going to name probably the same 2 or 3 objections that every other Christian in the world is going to say. These are sort of the starting objections. This book addresses those. And so it is, by addressing all these really, really big objections first, it gets the stupid stuff out of the way. It's sort of like, all right, these are things that people are going to say. Here's the answer. Now, again, it's not exhaustive. It's not going to walk you through an entire commentary on the book of Hebrews. and or, you know, First Corinthians for that matter, or anything else. But it's going to hit those really wave top, very, very common objections to Torah observant Christianity. And by doing that, it again offers the best introduction to understanding our position by pushing aside the stuff that we don't want to waste our time on to begin with. When I do have a conversation with new Christians, I love, or with Christians who are not Torah observant, who are new to it, or know nothing about it, and they object right away, I would actually prefer that they read this book first, and then we have a conversation after, because chances are that's not going to hit every point that they have, but it's going to hit all the big ones that I'm tired of talking about. And so when they come back, all the big stuff's out of the way. And now we can go on to the finer things, some of the details and other obscure references in Paul's letters, that we can now spend more time on things that require a little bit more theological depth, and stop wasting our time on some of the really easy, low-hanging fruit stuff that this book covers. And so that's another reason I really love this book. I have two more reasons. And so the second to best one, it is the best introduction to Judaism that I've yet seen. Okay, so many Christians are completely unaware of what Judaism even is. For a large majority of Christianity, their only window into anything Judaism is from the New Testament, and that is a very poor start. And what's more, any further knowledge that they're going to get about Judaism is going to be based from what is in the New Testament and from what their pastor says about Jews, and in the context of New Testament thought and conventional Christian thought. These are not good starting points. This puts you nowhere near into the realm of even throwing distance of Judaism. And so this book does a really good job at kind of roping it all in, and actually giving you an idea of what Judaism really is, what it actually stands for. It's going to dispel common misconceptions that Judaism is a works-based religion, because it's not. This book does that. It's going to dispel a lot of common Christian ideas that come largely from only using the New Testament as a source. And so I love that about this book. And actually, so that and my first one is, it makes you very comfortable. And I've already said that before. So yeah, you don't feel attacked reading this book. I've said that enough. So now I think that's going to be for things I like. So now let's move into some things I don't like. I don't want to spend too much time on here on the things I don't like, because there's really only one thing I don't like. Okay, so in the old, it's the difference between this version and the new one. So the new one has 3 additional chapters and some additional changes here and there within the already existing chapters. Pumpkin spice, baby. Okay, so let's talk about those 3 chapters. Those 3 chapters start at chapter 8, the Torah for the sons of Noah. Okay. There was a time in First Fruits of Zion history when they believed that Christians, again, in this book, will do a really, really good job at explaining that acts of Torah does not save you, that it is not a works-based salvation, and Judaism was never a works-based salvation, and that doing Torah does not earn your way into heaven. We do Torah because we are saved, not we do Torah to get salvation. It's very good at explaining this. So, and the old one was very good at that as well. But now we get into, the after the Heg split. That's correct. Bobby, you might as well do this. But the updated version is less convicting. It does take the Orthodox Jewish standpoint that no non-Jew should ever feel convicted to practice any Torah at all, and only to keep the 7 Noahide laws. Those 3 additional chapters support this idea. As before, the idea was, as a Christian, again, Torah observance is not required for salvation, but it is a covenant fidelity. It's a sign of covenant fidelity. It shows that you believe in God, that you have faith in him and his Torah and his everlasting promises. And So it's not that again, you don't practice Torah to earn your salvation or even to stay saved. Really, that's not what it's about. But there should be a sort of conviction. You should sort of feel a pull towards Torah practice in order to restore Torah and really to restore the gospel to its Torah context. And that if the Christian world were really to begin as a whole adopting Torah practices, it would further legitimize Christianity in the Jewish mind, and it would help bridge the gap between Jews and Christians, because then they would have the same foundation at which they could stand on. And in the new version, they side more with normative Orthodox Judaism today, that basically only the 7 Noahides should apply. Now, we talked about this last night on our episode. 7 Noahides are for regular everyday people, and even Jewabilly, which is his handle name. If you want to grow closer to Hashem in a more spiritual level, you are more than welcome to, and in some cases even encouraged to take on more Torah practice, to grow closer to Hashem and to begin to live in covenant fidelity with Hashem. And so here at Altarnate Media, we, of course, we believe that Yeshua is Mashiach ben Yosef, that he is the Messiah. And so as our primary teacher, as our Messiah, a disciple's job is to mimic his every motions, moves, teachings, and live the same life that he lived. And so the original book sort of pushed that as a disciple of Yeshua, you should mirror your master. The updated version no longer has that conviction. It kind of falls back into you can just keep the 7 Noahides and not worry about any of this. And so those 3 chapters kind of undo everything the previous 7 chapters just spent all the time building up. It kind of undoes it all. And then after that, it continues to use Acts 15, and they've edited some of their stance on the Acts 15 to show that the 4 prohibitions are really just an early version of the 7 Noahides, and that there should always be that the Gentiles should never be fully Torah observant. And once again, we would contest that Paul seems to argue that a legitimate conversion should be just a mikvah, and that should be considered a legitimate conversion. And so they should be treated as equals, as full-fledged covenant members. And as full-fledged covenant members, the covenant fidelity terms would equally apply, just as it would for any Jew. And so the idea of being grafted into Israel is that you would be considered as part of them. And so you should live as equals with them. And that's what seems to be really, that's what the first book sort of argues, and Paul, that we've seen before. And then of course, they have since taken a step away from that, and now they side more on the side of normative orthodoxy, where unless you're Jewish, you don't do the Torah. And so they have adopted that. I know why they've done it, and honestly, I respect them for it. It's fine. I don't necessarily disagree with the position. It is just understand, I'm being very nitpicky here. This is the only con about this book that I don't like, and I'm really, really being nitpicky because it's a very, very small detail to me. I think that Christianity, just in my personal opinion, should feel a sort of conviction and a pull towards a more Torah lifestyle to help, again, bridge that gap and start living the way our master lived. And by living in the same way he lived, our actions become a witness to Jews and non-Jews and the whole rest of the world of the kind of person that Yeshua really was. And there's so much beauty in Torah and its traditions and everything. You can really see the Messiah in all of these little commandments that you do. And so these things enrich your faith. They actually make your faith even stronger because you see the connections, you see the pattern, you see Hashem in all of the little details. You see Yeshua in all the little details. It's very beautiful. And so I don't like that those 3 chapters kind of undo that by sort of giving Christians this pass, like, but you don't have to worry about that. That's sort of what it feels like to me. You can agree or disagree with me. That's totally fine. That's just my opinion. And that's actually the only thing that I have that's even a little bit negative to say about the book. And so basically I put, it doesn't really encourage Christians to take on Torah practices. Now, again, I understand why they've done that. And again, I actually don't necessarily disagree because they're taking the Orthodox position. So they're actually siding with Orthodoxy here. And if any of you guys know us here at Alternate Media, we side with Orthodoxy. And so what's nice at the same time about that thing that I don't like so much is that for the Christian reading the book who does not feel drawn to Torah in any way, they once again won't feel super attacked. And, it's a nice introduction for them to understand more parts about Judaism that they otherwise would not have known. And it does give them a sort of comfortable way to say, hey, cool, thanks, but no thanks. And, again, we would encourage it, but we don't want to give the idea that we think that it is absolutely necessary for the maintenance of your salvation. And so it is, again, I understand why they did it. I don't necessarily agree with it. I like the old book better because those 3 chapters are not in it, but the updated version is not bad. So that being said, even though I have one con, understand that is not a massive con for me. I may be blowing it a little bit out of proportion. That's not what I'm doing here. And so to prove it, to actually make up for it, here's my recommendation score of this book overall. I would recommend Restoration by D. Thomas Lancaster, Returning the Torah of Moses to the Disciples of Jesus, a 10 out of 10. I would absolutely recommend, even the new version, absolutely recommend this new version. Or any version that you can get your hands on. I give Restoration 4 tassels, 4 out of 4 tassels. That's amazing. I'm using that from now on. Bobby, I'm stealing that. So I absolutely recommend this book. There's a reason it's the first book of the book club. I think it provides a great foundation point. So the next book that we're going to read is another book by D. Thomas Lancaster called Elementary Principles. Now, rest assured, not every book on our book club is going to be D. Thomas Lancaster. And D. Thomas Lancaster is not paying me to promote his material at all. I just genuinely like these books. Restoration is going to provide a starting point for us to get to our ultimate goal at the end of this 12-month book club cycle. This Elementary Principles, now that we've taken the book Restoration and we've hit a lot of the wave top regular objections that we see from a lot of Christians all over the map, now we're going to start and break down some things foundationally that are found as sort of elementary principles, and we're going to go over them individually as much more in detail. Let's see. So like repentance from dead works, faith towards God, instructions about washings, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, eternal judgment. So, and moving on to maturity. We're going to go, there's some stuff in here. It's the 6 found from Hebrews chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. This is going to be a good next step. Now that we've gotten some of the bigger stuff out of the way, now we're going to go and look at some more pinpointed things that are also equally important as we move forward, going into Messianic Jewish principles, more or less. So this is going to be a good next stop for us. As you see, I already have a copy. I've already read all the books on the book club list, and I'm rereading them just for you guys. No, these are going to be, so this is going to be the next step. So this is February's book, Elementary Principles, and March's book, for those of you who want to prep ahead of time as well, Besora by Mark S. Kinzer and Russell L. Resnick. That is going to be March's book for the book club. If you we're giving that book away. In fact, we're going to be doing that giveaway at the end of the month here, to see who gets Besora for the giveaway to our Patreon supporters. But and as you can see, so Basora is brief synopsis: the resurrection of Jerusalem and the healing of a fractured gospel. So if you're not noticing, there's a theme that we're actually going to go through here. We're going to cover some elementary principles, and then Basora is the Hebrew word for gospel, good news. And we're going to talk about what the word gospel really means. What does it mean in Jewish context? And that's another really, really good book. I can't wait to do the review on that one and give a recommendation score. So now we're going to move into the essentially that question. If I could add a bonus chapter, what would it say? I think, you know what, I would still leave in some of the Noahide stuff, but I think I would include a chapter on discipleship in the first century, about mimicking the master, and more be a little bit more encouraging for Christianity as a whole to begin to adopt Torah practices at a very, very slow pace, one thing at a time. It took me years before I started wearing tzitzit because I wanted to be absolutely certain about certain things before I moved into that. And so I think I would add a chapter that would be encouraging to begin to slowly, very slowly, adopt Torah practice into the daily life of Christians, until eventually it's just this massive phenomenon throughout all of Christianity that before we know it, in 30 years, Christians are all over the world doing subtle Torah things all the time. And that's how a revolution really starts. I think that's how I would, that's what I would add if I had to. So now we're going to move over into the supporter side. So we're going to talk about this book some further, but we're at the hour mark. We're done here. And so if you are a supporter at any level, the Patreon or on our website, I'm going to jump into the Discord. Let me go ahead and pull that Discord. If you're not part of the Discord, you should join it anyway, but I'm going to jump over to the Discord, not into the after part, as there's a new voice channel called the Altarnate Book Club. And we're going to go into the Altarnate Book Club and talk about some questions one-on-one and chill out, just for a little bit. And then we will call it a night. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me on our first rendition of a monthly book club here at Altarnate Media. And yeah, I think that's it. I can't wait to see you guys next month while we do an overview of elementary principles. Really bad at outros. So I will see those of you who are supporters. I will see you guys in the book club chat in the Discord. And everybody else, I hope you enjoyed the book review. I hope you joined us in this book club. I hope you consider joining us for the next book club, as we do one book a month for the next year. And until next time, have a wonderful rest of your week, rest of your month, and we will see you next month at the book club. So have a wonderful night, and for everyone else, we'll see you in the after party. Not after party, the Altarnate Book Club. You know what I'm talking about, the Altarnate Book Club. Have a good night, everybody. God bless.